Okay, everyone, we are going to be starting chapter 24 and 25 today. This is the heading for the chapter. I have it just called chapter 25, Belle, Epoque, but it's really chapter 24 and 25 together. This will be the chapter that will take us into pretty much into the 20th century, and it's not that long. It'll take us a couple days. And with this chapter, we're going to focus mostly on some of the movements within Europe at the time. And there are some things in here like the Second Industrial Revolution, population growth, the rise of the social sciences. So, La Belle Epoque stands for the beautiful era, and this is also known as Europe's golden age. So, what we're going to start with are two slides of notes to talk about what exactly is occurring here in Europe at the time. First of all, we are in the middle of the Second Industrial Revolution, which we will deal with on a separate day. But one of the things of the Second Industrial Revolution, there's going to be the increase in population due to more food supply being produced, and also there's new medical advances that also lead to people living longer. And pretty much the Second Industrial Revolution is also the one that America is experiencing as well. It starts right around 1850 and it lasts until into the 1880s. And it's similar in the fact that you have a large portion of your population moving to the urban areas. But as with the first Industrial Revolution, urban living also has problems associated with it as well. And we'll do those as we get into the Second Industrial Revolution. So, we also have a period of Europeans leaving Europe for other parts of the world, and a lot of them end up coming to the United States. We have our big population boom right around 1880. We have a big one. We had another one around 1850 because of the Irish potato famine, and then we have another one in the 19 teens due to World War I. So it's although they're losing population through migration, yet their population is still booming, and a lot of it comes down to we're entering a period of Europe where there is not a whole lot of fighting. There's not really any any major wars that are going on, such as what World War One will be, or even what the 30 Years' War was. So because domestically things are somewhat tranquil, people are more willing to expand their population through childbirth. There's a readily supply of food. So overall, we're building up into what eventually becomes World War I in 1914. But from 1850 to 1914, really the only major things occurring in Europe would be the unification of Italy and Germany. France is transitioning to a republic, but the Russian and the Ottoman wars that are taking place in the 1870s they don't really involve much of the rest of Europe. So overall, take this as a chapter in which there's not too many external disturbances, so that allows for more internal advancement to occur. Now, some of the things that we'll see in this chapter is going to be, because of the Second Industrial Revolution, you have a higher amount of materialism, more goods are being produced than ever before, and also through trade unions, labor unions, the push of socialism, higher standards of living are becoming more important to the workers of Europe. Free trade in the world markets. By this point of 1850, the United States is now a major player in the world, and Europe and the United States are competing for domination of the entire globe when it comes to trade. Advancing democracy. In the previous chapter, we saw how Britain and France worked through their transition until France became a republic, and Britain, they were always a republic, but began to introduce reforms to allow more of their male population to vote. And also through the liberal parties and the socialist parties of Europe, there was a greater push for the government to provide what we now call a welfare state for its people. And we'll also see there is a emergence of the social sciences, such as sociology, psychology, and what that does is it begins to put more pressure on the church, the Catholic Church, because people begin to question what use is religion when they believe science can prove all things that are reasonable. So now what we're going to do, we're going to move on, and what you're going to do is we're going to be in small groups, and at this point there are going to be 6 groups total. There needs to be 1 laptop per group. So if you don't have laptops out already, we need to get laptops out. We need 1 laptop per group, so a total of 6. And you're going to count off by 6s. Now, with this, groups 1 and 4, you're going to be responsible for the section called European Society. Groups 2 and 5, you're responsible for 2 sections, educational literacy and then family and childhood. And groups 3 and 6, you'll be doing religion. Now, there is a handout that the substitute will have to pass out to you, which explains some of the changes that are occurring in European society within the mid to late 1800s. And on this slide, it shows you the different points that you need to address in your reading. So the laptops are for each group to write a paragraph summary on your section. So whatever the bullets are, creation of leisure time, those are the things that you need to include in your summary. So the plan is that you will work together. It'll probably take you hopefully no more than 10 to 15 minutes. When you are done with your summary, you will print it out. So you will read the handout, your section. Based on the handout, you will then create your summary. Print it out. When everybody is done printing them out, there should be a total of 6 different papers. Each group will read the summary that they did, and then you need to hand them in, because I'm going to take the summaries and put them all together so that we have a class summary on some of the things that were occurring in Europe during the mid to late 1800s. All right, so at this point, you need to count off by 6s and get your groups together, and then work on creating your summary. All right, so go ahead and stop the video right now, and when you are done doing the readings, so after you're done creating your summary, read your summary to the class, which will take all of about 5 or 10 minutes, then begin the video again. Okay, now the last thing we're going to do is that there is a notes handout that the substitute should give to you. And anything that we do not get done here with, I will put the link to this video on the wiki space, and you need to finish the notes on your own if you do not finish them in class today, because I'm not going to be doing them on Thursday. We're going to be moving on. So whatever we don't finish, make sure you do it on your own. So there's a notes handout, and what this is called are the movements and trends of La Belle Epoque. So pretty much from the 1850s on to about 1914, these are some of the things that are happening in Europe. So these are all kind of individual things, like kind of individual spotlights. They don't necessarily all go together, but they're all movements, and that's kind of the point here. So the first one of the things we introduced last chapter was the introduction of socialism into Europe. It began in Britain with the First International. That does not last long. Karl Marx's first attempt was not necessarily the most successful, but it had a pretty substantial ripple effect on the rest of Europe. Every single country in Europe has socialism at some point, socialist parties. And in Germany, they had to address the needs of socialists because it was a party that was gaining power. So Bismarck, Otto von Bismarck, he addressed the needs of the workers in order to keep the Socialist Party from gaining power. So Karl Marx, who is kind of the father of socialism, his ideas will spread throughout Europe. Eventually, the Second International will form in 1889 and will promote the idea of socialist revolutions across Europe. And Russia will have they are by far the country that has the best example of socialist revolution, which will come up in the World War I chapter. Now, why is socialism so popular? The Second Industrial Revolution is the reason socialism becomes about. There are so many industrialized cities and so many industrialized workers that they begin to demand greater changes economically, and that's what leads to socialism. Socialism is an idea that represents the needs of the people. The government is responsible for the needs of the people. The people should benefit when the government benefits from industrialization. So that's why it becomes popular, because more and more urbanized workers are living in squalor, not being paid enough money, not having workman's compensation. And those are the things the Socialist Party is going to address. Okay, now, by the end of the 1800s, there are some changes that take place in Europe because of the push of socialism. Old age compensation, new regulations for safety, sanitation, limited work hours. The workday was cut back to about 5.5 hours, 5.5 days a week. And most countries are going to adopt universal male suffrage because that's what the people are demanding. So they're trying to keep revolt from occurring, and they give certain things up in order to keep the masses appeased, keep socialism down, and not let socialists take over. But in the 20th century, there's a couple examples of when socialism will actually take over. Even in Britain, they have the Labour Party. Now, the Labour Party is not necessarily a socialist party, but they are representing the wants of the workers, and it was formed because socialism was becoming a more popular idea in Europe. Now, moving on to the next topic, are Jews and anti-Semitism. Jews have always been a target. We've had them throughout the course. Now, the 1800s, they tend to become a little more willing to accept Jews in certain parts of Europe. In countries like Britain, they're given full rights. Even in places like Austria and Germany, they're given full rights. And part of it's because some of our very famous thinkers of the time, Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, and Albert Einstein, these are all Jews. And for a while, they enjoy a period of assimilation where they're not really being picked on. But what we'll see in a couple days or a couple periods is that there's this new idea coming out called social Darwinism. And this is where we start seeing a lot of racism against different groups of Europeans and other worldly people, Africans and Asians, but Jews are included as well. So even though for a while Jews became assimilated because of their business-like occupations, eventually they will also become targets once again, and anti-Semitism is on the rise. And we're going to talk about anti-Semitism, we're going to talk about social Darwinism on Thursday, so we'll get to that. Now, because of this, the increase of targets on Jews again, there's this new term called Zionism, which is the belief that Jews should simply separate themselves from all of the people. And their hope is that they would eventually be able to establish their own country or their own Jewish homeland. And this is where you start seeing some of the migration back to Palestine, which a large number of it happens after World War II. But this is where you start seeing the beginning of the thought of Zionism, independent Jewish state, so that they can escape the persecution that they feel in most places across the world. Now, the other group to deal with is going to be women. And there is a woman, she is the Queen of England, her name is Queen Victoria, and she does not really help the role of women, because Queen Victoria, she set a standard for what women should be, and for the most part it ended up being that women's places in the home and on the domestic front, while men are considered to be the workers, the breadwinners. So girls, your education would have prepared you for being a housewife or being a mother, while men, you're being prepared to be the dominant figure in the household. Now, by this point, girls, along with boys, are being put into school. Okay, they're being required to go to school. It's compulsory education. However, most girls' schooling, as I just said, target certain areas that they should prepare for life. They're not preparing women to be lawyers. They're not preparing women to be government officials. They're preparing women to do things that women should do, such as be a teacher, a nurse, secretary, librarian, uh, and also things such as being a clerk, telephone operator, nurses, overall jobs that I guess we would say don't require, at least in their opinion, does not require a whole lot of skill. Uh, and that's some of the things that women are being forced into at this time. Women still cannot vote. That won't happen until after World War I. And for the most part, women would not have been part of higher education, going to universities and colleges. Whilst there were some that did, the majority of them would not have participated in that. Now, we do start seeing the emergence of this term, feminism and suffrage, because we are about ready to see the emergence of this movement of women working for the right to vote. And the United States, we are not the first country to grant suffrage. It's going to be Britain and Germany, at least in Europe anyway. But what we're seeing is because women for a period of time were pretty important being in the factories, and there are still women in the factories. But the simple fact is, because there's not really any major wars going on, and you're not concerned with the war front or the external front, it gives people time to kind of think about their own situation, their own life, and women begin to realize that they're not happy, they're discontent with their current position of being secondary to the males, and that begins the movement of feminism and the pushes to gain suffrage. Okay, so these are just kind of like some unique things that are happening. So they're just kind of socialism, feminism, Jews, and that's kind of what this period of time is going to be about. So that's all. Like I said, if you were unable to do this in class, please make sure you do it for homework and have it done. And that's it. We'll see you later.